Turns out it's very difficult to design the perfect adventure motorcycle, because the question of what makes a motorcycle a perfect adventure bike is essentially a question with no answer. Think about it. If I ask you what makes the best super sport motorcycle, you already know the answer. It needs to have the most horsepower and weigh the least. Whatever bike can accomplish that is going to be the best crotch rocket. And everybody knows that. Everybody knows the destination of what a super sport bike should be like. And that's why every crotch rocket from every manufacturer essentially is morphing into the same exact shape and specs. They all have the same rear tire size, front tire size, same ergonomics, same gas tank size. They almost make the same horsepower, whether it's an S1000RR from BMW, a ZX-10R from Kawasaki, a Yamaha R1, or a CBR 1000RR from Honda. All of them from a distance look the same. But that's not the case with an adventure bike. You can go very many different routes to get to a good adventure bike, and that's what every company has done. Every manufacturer has taken a different approach, a different take, a different philosophy of what they think the best adventure bike is. For example, grab the Honda Africa Twin. It's a very tall, very narrow motorcycle. It sits at around 36 inch of seat height, which is super tall, super great for ground clearance. But at the same time, the majority of people out there can't ride it because it's just simply too tall. Or the BMW R1250 GS. That's also a great, fantastic adventure bike, and I have reviewed it. It's on my channel. Go check it out. But what's the problem with that one? It's filled to the brim with technology that makes it extremely expensive to purchase. They're about $30,000 to $35,000 US dollars to buy one, and they're almost impossible to fix on the side of the road. Or grab Harley Davidson Pan America, for example. The only goal of that motorcycle was just to look nice. So it sits in your garage and you grab your Starbucks coffee, you stare at it, and you enjoy the fact that you spend $30,000 on a Harley Davidson that does nothing well. And what is Kawasaki's take on what should be the best adventure motorcycle? You are looking at it right now. Kawasaki KLR 650, world's cheapest, least equipped, and easiest to work on adventure bike you can get. And because of those attributes, world's strongest military force, the United States Army, has picked this bike to be their standard issue motorcycle for the troops. The one that they throw off helicopters and airplanes, they airdrop this motorcycle down onto the ground, to the battleground for the troops to use. And this is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to go wheel to wheel and everything in between on this KLR 650 and see what you get for about $7,500 MSRP. Then we're going to get on it, go out there, ride this motorcycle, and put some of its capabilities to test. And then I'm going to quantify my thoughts and give this KLR 650 my Emmy score. Now let's talk about the biggest distinguishing factor between this motorcycle and every other adventure bike currently for sale on the market from other manufacturers, and that's the engine being a single cylinder thumper engine. That's right, this engine only has one cylinder. It's kind of rare to come by this type of engine on an adventure bike. They are still available on a lot of dual sports, but not on an adventure bike. This engine is a 652cc engine that makes about 39 foot-pounds of torque and about 40 horsepower. The question that comes to mind is, how does this engine balances itself, counterbalance of the single piston moving up and down? As you're aware, if you have more than one cylinder, the motion of the pistons can be ordered, the firing order can be adjusted in a way that they cancel each other out, but on a single piston moving up and down, that's impossible. So they have to use counterweights to kind of smooth this engine out so it's not vibrating you off the motorcycle. And the way that Kawasaki KLR has done it here is via using a chain with a tensioner and a weight attached to it, or I think two weights attached to it, called the doohickey system. So whenever you hear a KLR owner talking about pulling the doohickey on their motorcycle, what they're referring to is that they have deformed the tensioner of the chain that moves the weights. So essentially the engine can't counterbalance itself anymore and it vibrates a lot. But they have corrected that in the recent years on the KLR, so this engine does not suffer from that. It used to be an old thing on KLRs, but it's funny to tell you about it. So there, now you know what pulling the doohickey means. Now that you know that, and now that we know this engine is completely safe to start it up, let's do that and hear the thumping sound of the 2023 Kawasaki KLR 650's thumper engine. Let's talk about the front of the KLR 650, starting at the very top, the windscreen. It is movable. You can raise it up or lower it, but it requires tools. It's not as effortless as BMW or Africa Twin if you do get the option to raise and lower it with a push of a button. On this one, you can do that, but you need to go to the back of the bike, insert the key into this particular panel, switch the key, remove the plastic panel. Under it, you find a toolbox. You gotta grab the appropriate hex, come up here, unscrew these 4 bolts, remove them, move the windscreen up, and re-screw the bolts back in. Put the hex Allen key back in the toolbox, put the toolbox back there, repeat the process, and close that compartment up, and you'll be done with raising or lowering this windscreen. It's a multi-step process, but I assume if you are going to actually use this not as a party trick, but as a functional piece of equipment to move it up or move it down, you're gonna do it once and be over with it, depending on your height and your helmet and where you're comfortable it being. You adjust it once and you're done. You don't really need a button to move it up and down. And by not putting a button on a movable electronic system, you save money up front. This bike is much cheaper than those bikes that have the electronic moving up and down windscreen. And also there's one less thing to break because bolts don't generally break as often as electronic systems. So that's the windscreen on this motorcycle. If you do get the adventure version of the KLR 650, which is only about $1,000 more, you do get a larger windscreen. You also get auxiliary lights and saddlebags and crash bars, a whole bunch of goodies for just $1,000. So if you are really buying this bike to go on adventures, I do recommend getting the adventure version and not this basic one. But if you're just a tall person or you enjoy adventure bikes for the style they have, then this is probably the way to go. And you don't have to get all those extra things that can be stolen, break, or you have to pay extra for to get in the first place. But anyways, coming down from this fender, you get to the front forks. The biggest difference between this bike and the more expensive ones, it's not adjustable whatsoever. It's just the generic telescopic part spin kind of fork you can find, the cheapest you can find with this cheap flimsy looking boot cover. Compare this to the BMW R1250 GS that I reviewed. The one that I reviewed had a teleleveler system, which is even more expensive. But if you don't get the teleleveler on the BMW and you get a regular fork, look at this. Each leg of the fork on the BMW R1250 GS is $2,900 for the right one, $2,900, and $2,900 for the left one. So if you want to upgrade the 2 forks, these 2 suspensions on your BMW, you're out $5,800 just for the forks. This entire motorcycle costs only $7,000. BMW's front forks cost $6,000 out the door almost. That's the type of difference we're talking about here. Anyways, coming down from these forks, you get to this 21-inch spoked wheel with a 90 tire on it. And the brake power you get up front is only on one side, and it's this flimsy little caliper. It doesn't seem safe to sub a 460-pound bike plus 100 and some pounds of a rider, close to 600 pounds of a motorcycle with just one front brake. But it has to be doable and legal because Kawasaki did it. But anyways, that's what you have up front. Now, moving up here is where it's really gonna hit you why this motorcycle is an economy cheap adventure motorcycle. Because look at it. Cheap plastics everywhere, blanks. The LCD screen seems like it's from 30 years ago, which it probably is. The handlebars, the buttons on them, very simple. On this side, you only have the starter. On that side, you have turn signals, horn, and high beam. That's it. There is no adjustability anywhere for anything. There's no outlets. There's no USB-C. There's nothing. There's nothing. Now, on the adventure version of this motorcycle, you do have some of these blanks taken up by equipment. Like this round one here is a DC outlet. This rectangular one here is is the auxiliary light switch, and that giant cover over there underneath it. On the Adventure version, you're going to have USB-C. On this one, you don't have anything. It's as basic as it gets, to the point where this LCD screen doesn't even show you what gear you're in. They didn't even put that into this motorcycle. They didn't even equip it with that. It's that level of simplicity, which is actually part of the charm of this motorcycle. It's not really a downside if you're looking for it. But yeah, that's where it really hits you, that this motorcycle has a $30,000 price gap between it and the BMW R1250 GS, pretty much because of this. Now let's talk about the midsection on the KLR 650, starting up here with the gas tank, which is a 6-gallon gas tank. That's a pretty large one in the industry. The Africa Twin, for example, the base version, similar to this base version here, that one has a 5-gallon gas tank. If you want to get the Sport ES Africa Twin, which is a more expensive bike than this one, way more expensive than this bike, that one has a 6.6, so 0.6 gallon larger than this one. So this hits the average between the cheaper Africa Twin and the more expensive Africa Twin at 6 gallons. And compared to the R13 GS, BMW's new adventure bike replacing the R1250 GS, that bike has a 5.5 gallon gas tank. This one is still bigger than the BMW, which is far more expensive than this motorcycle anyway. So there you have it, a 6-gallon gas tank on this motorcycle, combined with an average of about 40-50 miles per gallon. Fuel efficiency that this motorcycle gets, you get about 250, best case scenario 300 miles of range on this motorcycle, which is fantastic. That's pretty much car territory of range on this motorcycle. Moving down from this gas tank, you get to the transmission, and get ready for it. It's a 5-speed transmission. If you have multiple bikes and they're all 6-speed transmissions, because that's 99% of motorcycles have a 6-speed transmission, you're going to be a little confused when you get on this and you go to 5th and you want to go to 6th, but it doesn't have it. Could be a little annoying at first. If it's your only bike, you're going to obviously get used to it, but if it's one of your many bikes, it might get a little irritating, the fact that you keep pushing, hitting the shifter pedal to go to the 6th gear, but you just can't because it's a 5-speed transmission next to the famous doohickey system. By the way, the doohickey system is right here. Now, talking about the engine, the doohickey system, the transmission, all of them are protected by this skid plate, except it's plastic. They have even cheaped out here the only part that really mattered the most, putting something to protect this engine that's claimed to last forever. It's not going to last forever if you hit it to something. Wish they had put something metallic here. It's plastic, it's flimsy. There are aftermarket ways to go metallic on this one, but Kawasaki itself doesn't offer it. So there is no OEM aluminum or steel or whatever plate. You just gotta have to deal with this plastic one or get an aftermarket metal. But anyways, that's protecting the engine, and it comes with it. No matter you get the base model like this one or the adventure one, they both come with this plastic piece. Now, you picked your adventure bike, you like it, you like the color, you like the manufacturer, you have a dealership nearby, you have budgeted for the cost of ownership, and now the next question is, what is the seat height? Can I fit the adventure bike I am about to purchase, which is one of the biggest questions when it comes to this type of motorcycle. Well, let me show you that. First of all, let's rank some of the most important famous adventure motorcycles seat height-wise, starting with the tallest of them all, the Honda Africa Twin, at about 34 inches of seat height, followed by the BMW R1250 GS at about 33 inches of seat height. And then you get to this bike and the Triumph Tiger, they're both about 32 inches. And the shortest of them all is the Harley-Davidson Pan America at about 31 inches. Now, most of these motorcycles do have versions, like a base one, an adventure one, and they might differ in size. So do your own research. Do read the seat height specifically to the bike you're buying. But this one is a 32-inch seat height, and I'm 5'8", and this is how I look when I ride this motorcycle. If I swing my leg over the bike, I can flat foot this motorcycle essentially with no bend in my leg, and I have to shift my butt a little to the side. I can't be on the center of the seat, but essentially, there. I have flat-footed now an adventure motorcycle, one of the achievements of my life. But yeah, it's pretty tall compared to a lot of other motorcycles that I do ride. So do consider that I am 5'8", 32 inches of seat height, and this is how I look on the KLR 650. Vroom, vroom. With all of that out of the way, I think you and I are ready to take this motorcycle out on the road and see how the KLR 650 rides. But before we do that, a huge shout out to Bellevue Motorsports for allowing us to take a closer look at this motorcycle. Go check out Bellevue Motorsports website. They have some of the most interesting motorcycles. They have an H2 and an H2 Carbon right now in stock. If you're interested in that magical made-per-order motorcycle, you can get it off their website while it lasts. They are also an MV Agusta authorized dealer, which is pretty cool. Not a lot of MV Agusta dealers out there, but I'm happy and glad and lucky to have them nearby with these interesting motorcycles in stock. Again, a huge shout out to Bellevue Motorsports. Go check them out. The link to their website is in the description section of this video. And with all of that, let's go and ride this bike.
All right, let's go. Once you get going, you forget, I mean, how like you don't care about flat footing or whatnot, and you're actually moving. This height is really nice. It's the same feeling as riding an SUV right after a sedan. You just feel more safe in an SUV than a low car to the ground. Isn't that an interesting thing? I wonder why that is. Okay. Alright. Adventure bikes are really fun. I did ride the R1250 GS from BMW. That was also a really sweet bike. The only problem with that is it's, how do you say it? It's too expensive to want to be peaceful on. At all times you're worried about 30 grand of your money just falling, tipping over. It's really crazy. But this one's $7,000. I don't have to sweat that. Those of you who ride those expensive adventure bikes, do you actually use the technology that it gives you, or were you just enamored by their existence and that's why you bought them? But now that you own the bike and it's been a couple of years and you've gotten used to it and the novelty has worn off, do you actually use all the fancy schmancy little gadgets and widgets on your motorcycle, or have you forgotten about it? Because I'm looking for honest feedback in the comments. Like, if you have a high-end adventure bike and that you don't use the gizmos on anymore because you thought they are useful or you thought they're cool to have, but you actually never utilize, let me know in the comment section, because that can help a lot of people when they pick motorcycles of this caliber, because it's an adventure bike. I don't know, there are certain things that make an adventure bike a better adventure bike objectively, like a larger gas tank. A gas tank doesn't weigh anything at all. I mean, it weighs as much as you put gas in it, but having the ability to have a 6, 7, 8 liter gallon gas tank. But if you want to go on shorter rides, don't fill it all the way up, and you benefit from the pounds of lightness that you gain from not filling your gas tank all the way up. But if you need more gas, you have the option to get more gas and put it in your tank. You know, that I believe makes a larger gas tank's existence better on a motorcycle than a smaller one. You know, objectively it's better to have a bigger gas tank than a smaller one. Height is one of those subjective ones, because the taller it is, yes, the more ground clearance you get, but also a little less stable, and also a lot of riders can't ride too tall of a motorcycle because they simply can't reach the ground. And unlike what a lot of YouTubers say, that, oh, you can ride any motorcycle regardless of how tall it is, there are midgets who ride motorcycle. I mean, yes, but is it safe? Is it comfortable? Those are the questions, not is it possible. Anything is possible if you have enough dedication. Do you want to do that to yourself? If I was 5'2", 5'3", I buy this motorcycle and every time I come to a red light I have to essentially get off the seat to be able to just touch the ground, I probably wouldn't buy this bike, you know? I'm kind of liking the simplicity. The BMW, just, again, as I said, the financial aspect of it, it made it a little too scary to ride. Also, it is overwhelming. Like, money aside, the fact that you have like 10-15 buttons on this handlebar and like 8 to 10 buttons on that handlebar, and like a giant LCD screen that's showing you a TFT screen that's showing you a million different data at a time, is overwhelming. And to be safe, you gotta ignore all of them, and if you ignore all of them throughout your ride, then what's the point of having them? And wobbles a little bit under high speeds, again because the front is so light. Oh, one big thing about this motorcycle versus the BMW is that the BMW, I believe, was a shaft drive, which is, oh boy, a mess. Shaft drive is thousands of dollars to fix if it's cracked or bent, whereas a chain is like $100 to replace. Another prohibitively expensive maintenance to have on that motorcycle should it face an issue. This bike is just a regular good old chain. The upside of a shaft is that it is sealed from the environment, so it's not going to get dusty like chain would. But I would, you know, take that any day over clean a chain over thousands of dollars worth of damage should that shaft crack. If I had unlimited money, finances were of no issue, I would probably get this one, the adventure version of it, if I was gonna adventure, or I would get the Africa Twin. Forget the Harley Davidson Pan America. I think that's no man's land. It is expensive and it offers you no benefits. At least the Asian made ones are cheap, even if they don't offer you anything like this bike. And the European ones offer you everything but at a hefty price. The Harley Davidson Pan America is the worst of both worlds. It doesn't offer you anything and it's extremely expensive.
And now, onto the ME score for the 2023 Kawasaki KLR 650. In the commuter category, the KLR gives you LED lighting for better visibility, a cushiony seat, comfortable ergonomics, a large windscreen, good ground clearance, and a ridiculous gas tank capacity. The KLR is amongst the cheapest adventure bikes at around $7,000, which gives you the peace of mind you need to throw it around as much as you want. The adventure version is a bit better equipped, but not this base version. It has absolutely nothing. The KLR earns a 15 out of 20 in the commuter category. Now onto the performance/dope factor category. As for track-specific tech and features, you get essentially nothing. As for power, it's a little bit underpowered with 36 horsepower to the rear wheel and 39 foot-pounds of torque for an average of 35.5. The bike, however, sits at 460 pounds, which for an adventure bike is not that much. But you gotta consider that you're gonna be adding a lot more weight to this motorcycle if you really wanna go adventuring around. So is the power enough for, let's say, a total of 650 pounds? I don't know. As for the design choices and marketplace, this bike looks rugged. The front end, however, is much bulkier and bigger in size than the rear end of this motorcycle, especially exaggerated by the fact that this motorcycle doesn't have any saddlebags or anything on it, which gives it a little bit of a ridiculous look. But once you do put saddlebags and a rear trunk on it, it balances the bulk on the front with a bulk in the back. Overall helps it look a little better. Kawasaki offers multiple colors and 2 trims of the basic one and the adventure version with ABS or no ABS depending on how you like this motorcycle. There's also no brand opulence when you're talking about Kawasaki. They do make really good reliable motorcycles, but it's not really luxurious like it would be on the Harley Davidson or the BMW R1250 GS. This bike gets 6.5 out of 20 for the overall performance and dope factor category. And it sits here on the list of other adventure bikes I have reviewed. When it comes to the current adventure bikes for sale, you get what you pay for, with the exception of Harley Davidson, that is. You pay very little for this bike and you get very little in return. The BMW R1250 GS is the other end of the spectrum where you pay the most and you get the most. I'd say there has to be a sweet spot between this bike and the BMW. And for that, I will either go to the KLR 650 Adventure version or a Honda Africa Twin.